Welcome to another conversation with Senator Theodros and myself, Dr. Quaho. Very excited to be back. And, we've had a few uh, travels and life things happen between now and the previous episode, but we're ready to rock and roll and get back and talk more policies. Let's jump right into it. I'm outside, so the sun's going to come down, so let's get into it. First, obviously, few things happened. November elections happened between our last conversation and today. I remember last time talking. The government shutdown had just started, also October 31st. So we really didn't know how the voters were going to react to what was then the beginning of the shutdown and just, the first set of big elections post Trump come into office. And we saw major victories in Virginia from the Democratic side, in New Jersey as well, and obviously, who can ever forget about the mayoral race in New York? So those are happened to swing the Democrats' way. Apparently, I heard anecdotally to Mississippi is now a democratically led General Assembly, I believe. If not one of the houses, but two of the houses is not Democrat too in Mississippi. So there's some interesting dynamics happening across the national political landscape. So as a elected Democrat in the state of North Carolina, how do you see these victories? Like, what does it mean? Is there room for excitement, or are we just, kind of going through the motions as an electorate? What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's room for excitement. I think, Democrats performed extremely well. Uh, Historically, it plays into the kind of swinging back and forth. Traditionally, when a president wins, that next midterm or the following sort of election cycle is not too great for them. But,
Mm-hmm.
we saw key pickups even in North Carolina. I mean, there are rural places where Democrats were taking over the mayorship. I believe
Mm-hmm.
a number of suburbs around Raleigh. Actually, a couple of them flipped to Democrats, and historically they hadn't done so. In Charlotte alone, City Council District 6, which people know is like the South Park area, has been a Republican stronghold for 50, 60
Mm.
years, and we finally flipped it this go round with Kimberly Owens as the Democratic candidate and the new incoming City Council member. And so, yeah, it was an exciting time to be a Democrat. Virginia picked up a
Mm-hmm.
of state senate and I believe House seats as well. And so, oftentimes, North Carolina has done its best to try to model its electoral, um, kind of mapping to Virginia. We're relatively similar in that we're a purple and down the middle state, as some people try to deny. But you know,
You're not purple. That's okay. I'll let you finish. But
purple.
yeah.
So yeah, so like definitely, as a sort of senator, it makes me a bit more optimistic, especially the next midterm cycle, that we can continue this momentum and really flip some of these Senate seats once we're on the ballot. And this is an ongoing effort. A lot of folks have, we've been recruiting. We've been in some of these other districts gaining attention to some of the folks that we're targeting. And so,
Mm.
yeah, I guess it does feel good to see sort of nationally Democrats doing well.
Yeah, good points. I think at the time, we were talking about the upcoming elections. I remember I was a little bit more skeptical. I think, Trump and the MAGA hive ran such a pretty domineering, across the board victories last fall. And obviously, with tariffs and his international policies, also the economy, federal work cuts, I didn't know if that was going to trickle down to voters. And I think one could also make the argument that some of these gains that the Democrats have seen are due to just more Democratic voters showing up this time around than they did either last fall or even in 2022. Right. So I think there's room for excitement. That the base at least is exciting, is being more excited to come to the polls. Right. Then to say the Mamdani race ended up having the biggest turnout in close to 3, 4 decades in New York. So that is a positive, and I think the momentum needs to keep going for the Democratic side, um, especially going into what's going to be a pivotal 2026. midterm election at the Congress level, and I know there's a few gubernatorial races that are going to be interesting to keep an eye on for the Democratic side. So I was surprised. I wouldn't say that. I know the Virginia race. I know uh, was surprising, but the New Jersey one was also something that like I was like, okay, now there's like room for folks to be a little bit more excited about what's to come within the party. I think the argument though that you and I have offline, but I think there's just kind of gathering a lot more momentum. What kind of Democratic Party are we going to be seeing, especially as a reaction to Trump? Is it going to be Bernie Sanders AOC type of Democratic Party where some of the ideas, the policy ideas, are a little bit more uh, fresh and a little bit more expansive, or is it going to be the Gavin Newsom moderate-ish, just kind of technocrat Democrat? So I mean, before we jump to the next topics, what do you think about what form this new Democratic Party? It's not new, but what form and language and fever and temperature the party's going to take going forward into 2026?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I don't know, and I think that's part of the dialogue. That's part of what's wrong with the dialogue, especially trying to figure out like what the Democratic Party's image is. Like, I think Senator Adam Schiff, California, made a good point because the two governors who were elected in New Jersey and Virginia, if you're to stereotype, you could see them as sort of a moderate. And but if you look at Mamdani, for all intents and purposes, he's a bit further left. Everyone had a great night. Both the moderate Democrats and Mamdani had a good night. And so I don't know if this election really showed us which ideology the Democrats should sort of embrace. I think you know, because I've been trying to do the same thing. Like, what is some actual signal that we can take away from this? Actual signal is, listen, Mamdani had a pretty leftist campaign, and he did not only win, he did a bit abnormally well, like historically. Um, so you can take that away as definitively being good. And then I think with our discussions with Gavin Newsom, it's like you fall in the politically, there is how you're perceived and then how you sort of govern. And so Newsom, we both kind of look at his policy and they're not crazy leftists, no matter what people think. But the perception of Gavin Newsom to the general public is that he's a liberal. I mean, he's, California. And I think it's new that he started getting on these podcasts with sort of right wing folks and trying to maybe moderate himself, make himself more moderate, whatever. But generally, if we're stereotyping here, people see him as a leftist. And so, like, I don't think there's really a definitive kind of answer. I think kind of what I looked at, what I found to be interesting is sort of like also the place that media had in these election cycles. I mean, you're going to a place where, and we can have a broader discussion about campaign finance. And so you're going to a place where there's sort of, at a point, a detachment between electability and campaign finance and fundraising. Mamdani was not somebody who can fundraise an ungodly amount of money. But if you think about these things from first principles, you're fundraising to do what? Spend it on media. It's I mean, you know, political campaigns are sweetheart deals for television stations. And so, like, you're just spending on media. Now, we've gotten to the place with digital media where it's completely decentralized, where somebody like a Mamdani who just makes abnormally good content is getting way more views than an Andrew Cuomo. And so,
Mm.
the interesting dynamic that, we're going to see moving forward is, do you start to put a bigger price on somebody's um, enthusiasm, somebody's charisma, how good somebody is on camera, versus like, oh, he can raise the necessary funds. Because I'll tell you right now, that is you know what I'm saying? If you want to run for Congress, if you want to run for U.S. Senate, if you want to run for governor, that is the one question that you don't move past. Can this person raise those funds? And that's where your dreams
Mm.
die. But I found it interesting that as you're saying that decentralized into media, maybe that conversation is like, okay, who's genuinely a great politician in media who can create the buzz for folks.
Mm.
Jury's still out, but I feel
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. Very solid points regarding the media and just the accessibility now that by the tapping a phone anywhere you can see everything all at once. Right? Obviously, there's good and bad to value value propositions to either of those. But yeah, the idea that you can really leverage all of our various social media tools to get your word across that can cut a lot of the financial burden that does come with running for office, even though there are still some pretty steep, significant, some
yeah.
burden. So yeah, I got yeah.
For like TV ads, you needed media consultants, you needed somebody to do
Mm.
your eyes, you needed like you can't even, and that's before you even pay for the actual television station
Mhm.
commercial. And so
Mhm.
with social media, a little camera enthusiasm, somebody have great ideas, like that's it.
Mhm.
Barrier to entry.
Yeah. Absolutely. And another kind of note to back, I think the mayor of Seattle also ran as a Democratic socialist. That flash came across on New York Times Daily when I was listening. So there's been just a lot of localized eyes. I think more so than we've ever, to me, than we've had in the last 20, 30 years. And that's probably because of the federal kind of trimming of the federal arms in many of the things that impact our daily lives. Speaking of something that impacted daily lives for a good 40, I don't know what the total count of the time was, 45 maybe, 46 days, was the government shutdown that came to a very unceremonious ending. If you look at excuse me, if you look at the political conversation that was happening around why the shutdown was happening, right? Around this idea that the ACA healthcare subsidies were expiring as a result of the passage of OBBA over in the summer, right? And Democrats did not want to fund a new CR budget resolution because without those specific subsidies being, you know, placed back into the budget. So they held out for 40 days. Saw folks lose a lot of their access to not only healthcare but to also like basic nutrition. Obviously, the federal workforce was not getting paid, and that trickled down to all of the sectors, right, who are seeing the impact. But we thought that healthcare was a wise reason to not fund the government at the way that it currently is. But over a span of 48 hours, we saw five or so senators. Um, we call them defect, but essentially decide to make a deal with the with the government with the Republican leaders. And the specifics of the deal, can be debated, but essentially came down to, SNAP and other, I think, benefits were going to be funded until September of 2026, and also a promise for this quote unquote vote over the ACA healthcare subsidies that is supposed to happen before January 30th, I assume, right? Which is when this new budget expires. So I know at the time that the news was coming out there was going to be a deal made, there was a lot of noise and a lot of rightfully so anguish from folks who supported the reason why the Democrats decided to go in a shut in the first place, you and I included. A a few days away from it because I think government will officially open on Wednesday, this past Wednesday, but a few days away from that deal. What are your thoughts now? Was it the right move to make at the time, and what do you think are going to be the implications going forward? And I have my own kind of conspiracy theory ideas that I kind of want to, hear what you got to say for the general public.
Yeah, I mean, we should probably just fast forward to your opinion. I really don't. Every time I try to form an opinion around this, I just realize my lack of like knowledge over what people are considering. What was the negotiation table like? And
Right.
so, folks like Tim Kaine, he represents Virginia, which a lot of
Mhm.
folks, you know, work for the government, and so like, should he have voted
Mhm.
for the state? But then, man, when these ACA subsidies uh, fall through a cliff, it's going to be a lot of people hurting. I mean, just going to be
Mhm.
straight up people dying, just straight up. There will be,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so like what sort of political calculation is that to be made? And so, you know, it gets to a like nasty but reality in politics where the negotiation and the things that you're negotiating is life and death. And
Mm,
so, again, I'm kind of dancing around the topic just because it's just tough with me not being at the negotiation to say whether somebody will.
yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, great points were made. I think Tim Kaine. I reached out to a former one of my advisors who was a fellow with Tim Kaine about 2 years ago in his office. So I reached out to him and asked him what his thoughts were, and he was basically like, the impact of the shutdown was real for his constituents. He wasn't particularly too keen on the fact that the ACA wasn't funded or the subsidies weren't considered at the time, but he understood. And I took some time, I reflected. Obviously, two key things to point out is that all five of the folks who essentially voted to reopen the government on the Democratic side were not going to face a race in 2026, right? A couple of them were retiring, consider safe seats. So then I was like, okay, well, that's the first thing. Two, SNAP was funded until 2026 at September next year. I was like, okay, that's interesting. And that this new CR was going to expire January 30th
The what?
of 2020. This new budget is expiring again in about a month, about 2 months. So then I was like, okay, what if this was one of those, let's get the government reopened, let's get SNAP funded so that there's no threat to it if there's a potential shutdown again, right? And we're gonna, when it comes to January 30th, say, okay, if that vote doesn't happen that Mike Johnson said was part of the deal, then are we seeing another shutdown? And are we seeing another shutdown where we're not seeing folks lose too many of the benefits? Obviously, federal workforce folks are still not going to get paid in that same way. Um, but is that a better risk? Considering people are going to get their food assistance already covered by the federal government because it's already kind of signed into September. So that's my take. Like, well, maybe this is like a kind of chess and checkers ploy and game plan by the Democratic Party to say, okay, we're going to publicly denounce some of these folks while privately backing what they did because we are seeing in about a month's time perhaps go into a shutdown and really, really burying our hatchet in the ground here and saying, yeah, we're not going to budge because you know, not as many people are going to be impacted. But we'll see. That's just my conspiracy theories of it. Are people that cunning and strategic? I would say so. But is that something that they're going to do this time? I don't know. So I think as time elapsed, I started to kind of see, okay, maybe there's a longer play here that we're going to be seeing. But obviously, to your point, though, regardless of the play or not, we're going to see some major disruptions in healthcare provisions. I mean, obviously, you spoke on that about what's going to happen in North Carolina if not if once OBVA comes into full force, which is going to be 2028, I believe. So we're going to really see some choices being made around healthcare um, provision, not only for folks who don't have access to healthcare, but also there's some of the subsidies help small business owners employ and provide healthcare to their employees, right? So now, if you have to foot that cost of providing healthcare, what is that going to do to the type of employment that folks can have, let alone being able to be employed with a place that has a 401k and healthcare, right? Which was a package that people are looking for. So, long story short, we'll see. But I'm intrigued. I mean, I'll keeping my eye on what comes out and on the wire across the next couple of weeks as we go into January. Um, Again, I'm making great segues because now one thing that we know is being funded and seeing increasing fund is in this. What are they calling it over there at the White House? Immigration. You know, this immigration where we're keeping American citizens safe and getting rid of all these criminal foreign undocumented folks, right? We're seeing an uptick in the budget for ICE. Obviously, upwards of $12 billion is going to be appropriate over the next few years. But in the present time, we're seeing ICE raids in our beloved state of North Carolina. As of earlier earlier last week, um, they showed up on our doorsteps. Can you walk us through a little bit of about how that's been? When did you learn about it, and what's been transpiring in the state as far as immigration and ICE, and when can we see a potential shift away from some of these more draconian tactics?
Yeah, no, I mean, so from my perspective, we had heard rumors that it's ICE and Border Patrol. So ICE already has
Hmm. Yeah.
office in Charlotte. Border Patrol have has been sort of the force you've been seeing nationally with the more viral videos of them being rough on folks. So we initially heard rumors that they were coming from Chicago to Charlotte and then somewhere else. But again, these are literally rumors, and I want to tell folks
Hmm.
proper way a federal government really puts himself into a state. Whenever you see a national emergency, whatever the case may be, you oftentimes have briefings with not only elected
Hmm.
officials, but with local communities so you can integrate into the
Hmm.
community a bit better. So you let the sheriff know, you let at least the police force know. We didn't get
Hmm.
anything. So as senators as well, we didn't get any kind of briefing that they were coming. We're
Hmm.
literally on the phone with reporters saying, "Hey, have you heard anything? I haven't heard anything," and we're all trying to look for more information.
Hmm.
So yeah, so as that sort of developed, you're forced to kind of use um, uh, any kind of means to get information and let the community know. And so the second sort of phase of that was okay. From what I hear, is this legitimate enough to start letting community members know? And so after a certain point, when the rumors became a little too glaring, you started seeing more stuff on social media. We started getting sort of anonymous tips about hotels that were going to be housing Border Patrol. That's when we said, okay, this is a little bit more legitimate. We can expect them to come. And then you
Hmm.
start sightings, pictures get sent over. And so, yeah, and the thing that we've come to learn is even all that time spent in Illinois and Chicago, about 2.6% of those that are picked up by Border Patrol uh, have sort of a criminal record. I mean,
Hmm.
2.6%.
Hmm.
I just the onboarding to this role has come with sort of meeting reality head on because,
Hmm.
as you know, Joe, we're learning about U.S. history, even the things that we learn in our textbook. The
Hmm.
United States was oftentimes the one fighting against countries that did things like send federal forces to knock on doors for folks. It's just kind of
Hmm.
learned as a child where we were, we can
Right.
argue about the facts here, but that's just the story that we were told. So to see
Hmm.
people dragged and they're oftentimes American citizens um, is not only disheartening, but like, you start to think like, man, the worst of what you see on Twitter may be true. Like all of this
Hmm.
stuff is actually happening. You have a federal force literally invading your city and kidnapping folks. And for the folks that ask, we don't know where folks are going. Like if somebody gets arrested,
Hmm.
they don't tell us, eventually we found out there's an FBI um, office and a holding cell that they essentially have people, but they don't tell us where
Hmm.
another rumor is they just put them on a plane and ship them back to wherever. And
Hmm.
so that's sort of the information we're getting. And then like so, as an elected official and somebody who represents a good portion of Charlotte, my job then became okay. How do we get information to folks as soon as possible? How do we ensure that we're getting the right information and not just rumors? How do we get additional resources if people feel
Hmm.
unsafe? And this is things that people were talking. There are American citizens that were picked up. Like
Yep.
I comments, but there are American citizens who are paranoid about even leaving their house. So how do we get you
Hmm.
to get in contact with like grocery stores that can drop off food to your house and you don't have to make that trek over to the grocery store? I mean, how do we connect you with those kind of resources? And then even schools. I'll bring this to a close, but so we saw this Monday or Tuesday, 30,000 students didn't show up for school in Charlotte.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so, but people don't initially think about the long term effects of that to a child. Like
Hmm.
30,000 did not show up to school. And this is
Hmm.
oftentimes, school is the only place where people get The only meal for the day, the only breakfast.
Hmm.
You remember that reduced breakfast that we used to get? That
Man, those that pop that those pop like Kellogg pops. You put the
yeah.
water in the cereal. Yeah, for sure, for sure, for sure, for sure.
So I mean,
Yeah.
that's the only meal that people. And 30,000 of them just stayed home, and so like you know, and I don't know. So sort of what are your thoughts? So that's the inside, and people start to
No.
realize, wait, I have the same information people have. So
Yeah, I mean, but obviously, plug the fact that you were able to kind of speak on this on a national outlet. Like, congratulations on that, and very happy to see some of the clarity, excuse me, that you were able to share on CNN a couple of days ago. So maybe we can put a link there when we upload this. But yeah, I mean, everything you're saying is right. I think when you texted me about ice being, I didn't believe it. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Why Charlotte? Especially, I think what we have been seeing in the past, while it's been in democratic states, it, the General Assembly is pretty much Republican. So I was confused, and then they just did redistricting. So I thought there was some political capital in North Carolina that could have helped ICE or and Border Patrol, this force, not show up. So I was confused. I didn't necessarily believe it in the moment, but then obviously things things came to the point where we saw ICE. Even I'm kind of snickering a little bit because we have our restaurant in Charlotte, Halal Cart, who were visited apparently. ICE. Just how ridiculous that is that. But I think three things I want to add is this. And again, I'm been in a New York Times bubble the last 3 months, but it is what it is. They interviewed the head of Border Patrol. Last name is Bovino, I believe, is the person, maybe Gregory, to ask him, to kind of learn more about the tactics, the things that we witnessed in LA, the things that we witnessed in Chicago. Are those things or anomalies, or is that going to be a continued experience for the foreseeable future? It appears to be that these sorts of raids that are indiscriminate are going to be happening across the country for the foreseeable future. That he used. So you know how people like get pulled over because of they look like whatever. That's the burden of proof that he said they're allowed to use. Obviously, beyond a reasonable doubt, one of them, and then it goes down to that level. And I forget the specific terminology that they use, but basically, if you look foreign, like it is their duty to stop you because that is legal according to the aims of what the orders have been from the White House as far as some of these raids are concerned. So that's is that coming from my end?
yeah, I
Are
think
you
so.
hearing that ding? Okay. So anyway, so those are two things that I wanted to bring up here as far as like this is a very very coordinated one of probably for better or worse one of the most highly coordinated efforts that we've seen happen in the Trump administration, but it's just for wrong, right? So we're not gonna um, uplift that too much. But I do want to add something towards what you said about the kids being absent. Obviously, we're seeing. I mean, that's learning loss, and then you mentioned the trauma when you were being interviewed. But also, I want to see if there's been any numbers around the economic impact. Some of these indiscriminate raids on cities, right? What is it like for the local economy, for the local marketplace, at least when they're still there, right? Because we could imagine that consumers, not just folks who are may not be documented, just you and I, regular citizens who do not want to be indiscriminately pulled over by border patrol, or even just the thought of being in this place where you don't feel like you're safe as a general city, as a citizen, right? Maybe you wouldn't want to go and frequent that local bar. Maybe you wouldn't want to go and go to that local musician show and spend dollars there at the local pub, right? So what are the real implications economically speaking of these raids? And I'm sure maybe y'all will get some of those numbers in some briefings, but that's just something that I think we got to keep an eye on. To talk about right in a place where there's already economic um, you know scarcity happening for a lot of folks, especially around the holidays. What does it look like to call out of work because you don't want to go and be purview to be and stopped by ICE, right? So that's just something that I think you got to keep an eye out on as the numbers come in. Um, okay, so I think so those were the two like grand topics, but we got a few more kind of like lightning round situations I want to talk about. Let's talk about maybe this Epstein vote and really beyond just what's contained in the files, right? Just the terrible behavior that some very key players have contributed to over the last 30 years when Epstein was doing his ring, but the political theater behind it as far as the whipped votes that weren't whipped, and then the flip from Trump and then Marjorie Taylor Greene announcing yesterday that she was resigning from her position come January. So there's been a lot of dominoes falling out over this Epstein ring. So what do you think? I mean, a lot of analysts are saying this is a major display of a crack in the MAGA in the MAGA household, right? What do you think? Is it as heavy as we think it is, or it's just kind of one of those another episode in the history of Donald Trump and the administration? This
Yeah,
version.
I definitely think like listen, the Epstein list and sort of the media around sort of Epstein was a big driver of some of the support for Trump. Like there's just because I don't want to say so there's it fits within a pattern like Epstein's list just sounds like it's something from a fiction movie. Somebody's connected with multiple billionaires and people in power and how could
Mm,
happen. And so once you start learning more and more, and there may be some truth to this,
mm,
Donald Trump, the savvy person he was when he was running for office, just took hold of it and really pressed it on the elite, the media.
mm,
They're the ones hiding from you. Look, they're actual pedophiles. So it was a big, it was a big part of his, sizable part of his.
mm,
So then you
mm,
fast forward to a point where it sort of starts to get weird to what extent he wants to keep this Epstein list private.
mm,
From the emails that were leaked out, that clearly
mm,
had a relationship, good relationship with the gentleman, like clearly.
mm,
And
mm,
so, yeah, and then some of his strongest supporters, much to your point, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, kind of, I think Thomas Massey,
mm,
went against them, and I think an elected official, Democrat Ro Khanna. Have you heard of him from
California. Yep,
extremely,
yep.
by the way, very impressive.
Okay,
Uh,
I gotta look more into him. Yeah.
yeah, so very, he's probably been like the sort of the person to watch here, and so yeah, I mean, I think it has been a big crack and fracture in sort of the MAGA movement and base, and you see
Hmm.
people claiming this is the most important thing in the world, and now flip flopping and saying this is a conspiracy by the Democrats, and so
Right.
it's been, I guess, pretty entertaining to watch, and I think one additional angle to this, and I wouldn't be a good senator if I didn't tie this back to North Carolina, is that there's
Mm,
oftentimes a lot of talk about the specific crimes that Epstein did, and not necessarily just the crimes, but the culture here.
mm,
It's very important to shine light that here in North Carolina, the legal age to get married is 16. And you can allow up to 4 years of difference. And so it is legal in North Carolina for a 20-year-old to marry a 16-year-old,
mm,
parental consent. The FBI, multiple subject matter experts have expressed what this does to uh, a potential young woman's life, just in the aggregate, and how these laws are oftentimes dangerous. You want that age to at least be 18, same as age of consent in many states.
mm,
And a bill was introduced by Senate Democrats earlier this year to say in North Carolina, let's just say you got to be 18 to get married. It's not crazy.
mm,
This was blocked by Senate Republicans, which I was dumbfounded by. And so, and
mm,
for those that don't know, the legal age to get married in North Carolina was 14 up to like 4 years ago. It has just
mm,
recently even moved up to 16. And so, you know, um, so this constant disguise, I mean, there's
mm,
consistent things that will surprise you in terms of like politicians. And I guess my
mm,
point is you can look no further than North Carolina, where you have
mm.
compulsory laws like this.
more to come on the Epstein stuff. I think the fallout is gonna. It seems as if, to me, this reversal from Trump insinuates that there's going to be some significant uh, revisions to whatever we get to see as far as files go. But, the like I keep saying, the obstruction of justice lawsuits are going to be happening in the next 20 years as it pertains to what we're experiencing today is going to be theater, um, theater for sure. Okay, so we got a couple of things. It's getting dark over here, so that's life's cue that we're reaching our conclusion. But real quick, on the let's real quick on the I got Africa news to give, and then latest with the Texas maps that could signal another crack in the MAGA foundation, right? A circuit court of three folks. I think a couple of them were appointed by Trump actually. Blocked, said that the Texas maps were unconstitutional. They were gerrymandered too heavily relying on race. So the Texas Governor Abbott plans to appeal this to the Supreme Court, and so we'll see if the Supreme Court takes it up. Although there is something that the Supreme Court is taking up next June from Louisiana on gerrymandered in the opposite way. They're saying New Orleans, a city that's I think majority. No, I don't think it's majority black anymore, but it has a heavy black population. That um, those maps were um, too lenient on race. So the Supreme Court is going to hear a case on redistricting and gerrymandering, and if race should be used. So we'll see what the fallout is going to be, but that's what happened in Texas. And then last is a roundup of African news. I don't know, Shit, are you familiar with what's happening in Sudan? I mean, it's bedlam over there as far as like the humanitarian crisis regarding the civil war that's happening not in South Sudan but in Sudan, and who the foreign entities are backing the rebels, right? Russia's involved allegedly. Now the Arab Emirates is also involved allegedly in financing some of these wars, the war that's happening in Sudan, and it's all over huge gold repository that is happening there. Didn't we see a couple of weeks ago a headline regarding like the gold standard being people are reinvesting in gold? Did you see that come across? Like there was
Yeah,
like now a new yeah.
whenever the economy is doing relatively bad, you're going to get a lot of folks who
Okay,
are.
this just okay, so that's just normal. Okay. But yeah, so Sudan I think something to keep an eye out on as far as the UN and conversations around what it looks like to really show support for what happened in Palestine, but also have that support for our folks suffering on the continent, right? Um, Congo still going. You know how Trump is talking about ending wars and trying to end the ninth and tenth war. There's a proposition on the table now from both sides, but the Congolese government is not trying to sign it because
Is now
it's not trying to sign it because essentially it's like ceding land to a terrorist organization essentially is what the offer is, and so they're prolonging that. And the last thing, something's happening back in my home country. The Ivory Coast and Burkina Faso are at odds over border disputes. Yes. So we had a very terrible genocide, 2012-ish,
who did?
and Ivory Coast.
I did not know that. You did not tell me
Yeah,
this.
20. Yeah. I kept that one to myself. But so there are, according to locals in the northern part of the country, jihadist paramilitary organizations coming across the border from Burkina Faso trying to recruit villagers in the north um, to become jihadists. And there's been some fires exchanged from our army to these paramilitary groups in the Burkina Faso. And Burkina Faso and Cote d'Ivoire have not had great relations between 60 and 80. In the mid 70s, late 70s, early 80s with Sankara. There, we were implicated in his assassination. Then yeah. Listen, it is what it is. I don't condone that behavior. But then the president that was installed in Burkina Faso, Blaise Compaoré, for 20 years, great relations. But this new guy, um, were at odds. So it's just another long-standing new development in the Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso territorial, you know, fighting. So that's what's happening in Africa right now, and we'll have more of an update next time. And definitely, I should definitely not do this outside again. This is not the best idea, but yeah.
No, I mean that's I guess kind of a good wrap up. Especially keeps. I mean, this is a big globe here, and so the more we talk about this, and I don't think I told
Mhm.
you Wednesday, I sat in on. There has been this group, and it's not just a small group, but lots of folks wanting to increase relations between North Carolina and Africa, mainly through economic
Okay.
means. And so, Kimberly Nelson, I think you've met her in passing at one of my events. But her and her husband Paul Nelson have been passionate about really taking a look at emerging markets and how do we sort of begin that relationship between uh, North Carolina and some of the emerging markets in
Mhm.
Africa. Sat through there a bunch
Mhm.
of and surprised to hear how many folks in North Carolina just randomly like own a grocery store in Ghana or just like have a couple of homes in
Mhm.
Uganda and stuff, which is and I listen if you follow. I mean, just not if you follow. Just look at the stats here. I mean, the majority of sort of able-bodied, especially men above the age of 25,
Mhm.
after like
Mhm.
2040, you're going to come from Africa. If you look at what we're
Mhm.
doing towards energy and the need for computation, if solar energy continues to be important, to databases continue to be important, the logical place you're going to throw them are in places in Africa. And so you're going to
No,
start.
we don't want data centers in Africa, please. No, dear God. Is that no?
I mean, more so like solar,
No, we're suffering too much. We're trying solar energy type.
solar
Yeah,
energy.
okay. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
because you guys have done a great job in the past decade.
Okay.
To be a topic for another day. Uh,
Topic for another day.
Africa's going to be up for
Mm,
quite. Uh, so
well, yeah, I mean, yeah, do I mean, we're gonna start talking about something else. I'll just say that leaders um are having to like stop. We need to stop giving our land away to foreign entities. Africa doesn't own the soil, like literally. We provide the labor to extract, well, to send it to China and Russia right now. That's what's happening. So as the U.S. and North Carolina is looking to expand its markets, we got to remember to make it fair. But that's just owning the means of production is a key aspect of this, and we have to look as ourselves in the continent too and say, hey, like you know, we need to be better business folks, right? But yeah,
yeah, I mean, there's a negotiation play here, and there's no excuse for not no excuse. It's a lot more complicated than that. But the point is, like United Arab Emirates, the entire like parts of the Middle East are having a ton of investments from the West,
right.
seem to be doing very well, and so granted, big difference between parts of the Middle East, UAE, et cetera, and Africa, but like it is possible to have good economic.
Yeah, but also we can't talk about OPEC. I mean, like they literally they have like embargoed oil, so that helps.
Which
That's
is my
why as
point.
far as like you.
No, it's different, but
Okay, okay. So, your point. Okay, your point is just like ownership of. You're right. Well, I mean, that's what the U.S. tried is to own the oil produce the land of the oil, like in back in the 70s and 60s. You're right, absolutely right.
as as oil and natural gas, like its time is limited. Just
Mm,
solar energy, and who's getting more sun than anywhere else in the world? I mean, it's going to be Africa. You have access to what will be sunlight will be a natural resource that everyone needs, and so
mm,
not yet, but
good point. Good point.
that was the initial point. What I was saying about like data centers, not the actual data centers, but They need to run
But
off,
just
and you got that thing. And so, but you got to be smart about it. To your point,
yep,
make those
yep,
games.
yeah. I'm officially that part of the concert where the sad songs are playing because I got my flashlight out.
Yeah.
Let's rap, let's rap. But I mean, great competition again, and we look forward to expanding. We'll have way more to talk about. I think as the holidays. One thing to keep an eye on for me is going to be the economic numbers. Sort of, 119,000 jobs were added. I don't believe that, but that's why I'm really going to talk about. I want to see what the spending numbers are going to look like over the next few weeks. So that's just something that was definitely going to be a topic of discussion going forward the next couple of weeks.
Cool. All right. Well, until then, we'll
Cool.
be back next week.
Yeah, we'll be back. I'll talk to y'all.